So, welcome back to another episode. And have you ever saved up for a console you were really excited about, you really had high hopes for, and you bought it and it just fell flat and you were completely deflated and you're like, oh my god, I cannot believe that I bought that console. And I tell you, nobody better say the goddamn Dreamcast or I'll murder you. But have you ever been looking forward to a console and then you got it and it just didn't live up to the hype? Everything you built up in your head, you're like, oh man, I thought this was going to be fun, and this certainly isn't. To be absolutely honest, every single system has its highs and its lows. So don't have a flame war down below, but what is a console that you were a little disappointed with when you bought it, or you were given it as a present, something that didn't live up to your internal hype? It's funny, for me, it was when I was 20 years old, and it was a weird time in video games. It really was. We were coming off the Super Nintendo, 2D graphics, all these wonderful 2D graphics, the Turbo graphics, and all this stuff, the Genesis. It was a really golden era for video games. But at this point, brand new things are coming in, and I'm not against brand new things, but it was very different from my old days of 2D. They were ushering in full motion video. Remember all that stuff, and I didn't know how I felt about it. I was excited about brand new kind of cinematics with real digitized characters. It was exciting in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways it was scary, and I didn't really know what to expect. So Christmas came. My parents asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I was like, well, I don't know. It's really weird. I didn't feel as sure as I used to with the Super Nintendo. Oh, a Genesis would be pretty good. Or, oh my god, the TurboGrafx CD-ROM. I was very unsure about the next move with video games and video game machines. The whole market was changing. I didn't know who was going to be on top, who was going to be below. It was a bit of a gamble. But I'm a gambling man, and I said to my parents, it would be so cool to get a 3DO. I think that's the way to go. I think this is the way to go, for sure. So, now I'm going to show it. There's a classic photograph of me, Christmas morning, getting the 3DO for Christmas from my sister's boyfriend at the time. He was over with his long 90s hair. It's pretty funny. I'm there with the bandana. I think I had my morning cigarette, Christmas morning, and I was unpacking the 3DO. But what's interesting about the picture is I looked so perturbed. It was like something was kind of going on. I wasn't unhappy, but I was a little nervous. I think I was a little nervous about the 3DO that I got for Christmas, and I always want to thank my parents for being the best parents in the world for getting me something like that. That, number one, I totally appreciate that. But at the same time, we gotta admit, the 3DO was no Super Nintendo. And here it is. Here is my 3DO Gold Star. It's got a little bit of dust on it. I had to get it out of the closet. I have looked after it, after all these years. What do I want to say about the 3DO? The 3DO, there's so many memories going on here. Lots promised. Was a lot delivered? There's a lot of stuff delivered. There's a lot of full motion video games. Was there some good games in the system? Yes. One of my favorites, let's talk about some of the pauses of it first, was the, Return Fire. I love that game. Me and my friend Swagger would always play it. He's a huge war buff, and we just love playing, with, straight, Flight of the Valkyries music playing as I'm bombing him and stuff like that. That was great times. But there was a lot of games that were just kind of hit or miss. Demolition Man, I'm not even going to get into that. That's a whole other video into itself.
You suck.
I want to show you where I was at with video games at the time, coming from the Super Nintendo and arcade days. I wasn't against full motion video, but I was still holding on to my roots, and I always have. And these are the games that I got on Christmas morning, and this is pretty cool. Samurai Shodown. This is my original game. This is my original game from all the way back then. I needed my 2D Neo Geo, and let me say, at the time, this was the best way at home, if you didn't have a Neo Geo, which I didn't at the time, to play Samurai Shodown. This was arcade perfect. It really looked great. And that was very cool Christmas morning. Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. This was the best way to play this game back then as well. arcade perfect. It was great to get to Akuma at the end. That was the big deal with this game, but that was awesome. And then a mediocre RPG I got as well, Guardian War. I got that on Boxing Day. So I got that the next day, and was it okay? It wasn't so terrible, but it could have been better, for sure. So why would I hate this? Why would I be so saying this is the worst console I ever got? It really is. In the grand spectrum of things for the games I bought for the machine, Road Rash was pretty good as well, but for the grand spectrum of, when I look back in all of the years of video game machines and stuff like that, I didn't enjoy this machine enough. There was not enough games for it that I personally enjoyed. And here's some of the things that really drove me mental about the machine. Okay, here is the wonderful controller. It's got 3 buttons. That's pretty cool, right? Let's pick up the machine here. Oh, I can plug my controller in here. Great. Where do I plug my second controller into? Now remember, the Super Nintendo came out before this. There's no second controller port on the 3DO. No second controller port. You know where it is? This fucks me up. I missed this. When I was doing my research as a kid in my video game magazines, I missed this. The controller port for second player is on the top of the controller. So I had to go and buy another controller right here, and I had to plug it in to the top. This is ridiculous. So my controller's kind of like weighted with somebody else freaking playing beside me. I'm like, if he doesn't like me, he can just yank the goddamn controller, his controller, and yanks mine. It was so backwards, and it kind of showed you that they really didn't research video gamers too much and how things really should be working, especially when we're coming off the Genesis, the Super Nintendo. Obviously, the TurboGrafx needed the Turbo Tap. We understand that as well, but that was frustrating. But here's another thing. These are the games I got because this morning I go to play Street Fighter, and I'm like, hey, wait a second. This has only got 3 buttons. How do I do 6 buttons? Even the Super Nintendo controller had 6 buttons for Street Fighter, and this didn't. It had a couple of shoulder buttons that weren't very good. It's like, this was not the ideal way to play it. It was not the ideal way to do it. You can count these as buttons for sure, but you don't want to be playing Street Fighter pressing those types of buttons. That doesn't make any sense. And I get it. There was alternatives. There's a 6-button control pad offer inside the box for Super Street Fighter Turbo. But look at that thing. I couldn't use that. On Boxing Day, when I went to get Guardian War, I picked up this weird little peripheral right here. The 3D Zero Super NES controller adapter for 3DO extension. Now, here's what's okay, but still kind of weird. You plug this into your 3DO. You grab your Super Nintendo controller. You can connect that. So you got one person playing on a Super Nintendo controller. Good for them. The second player, could plug in right here. So somebody gets a Super Nintendo controller and somebody does not. Do you know how many arguments that caused? That is the reality of video games back then for the 3DO. This is the frustrating thing about trying to play 2D fighters. It was very, very annoying. So that really drove me mental. It really drove me nuts. I gotta say that was not the right way to start Christmas morning, trying to plug things in and, I need an adapter and I gotta go to the store buy another adapter just to sit down and play video games. So, yeah, the 3DO just never rubbed me the right way. It didn't feel as fun as like the Super Nintendo and the Genesis and the TurboGrafx. It just didn't have that feeling to me. It didn't feel very well put together as a package. There was all these games coming out and some of them were just horrendous. I mean, I just skipped over so much stuff, and I was just waiting for this to end so we could get on with the next generation of video game machines. And I knew I made a mistake. I knew I made a big mistake buying it, but these things happen, and I have a hilarious photograph all these years later, and this gets a gold star, no pun intended, for being the one console that I ever got that I really didn't like that much. I wasn't really a fan of, and my mind never changed on it. And I was there day one, and I knew all the games out at the time. There's some other RPGs on it that were very hard to find, like Lucian's Quest and stuff like that, but you know, it just never did it for me. It never was the system that I wanted it to be, that's for sure. But guys, I'm not alone. There must be some systems out there that you got that you're like, oh my god, I just don't like this. It just totally rubs you the wrong way. And it better not be the goddamn Dreamcast or I'll murder you, for sure. But honestly, I'm just kidding around, but what is a console that you didn't like, that you weren't a big fan of, and you had buyer's remorse about? So anyways, guys, that is mine. Until next time.